Welcome to another episode of the WAN Manager podcast. Today we have Johan Ihse, product owner of global connectivity at H&M. So like we did in some of our previous interviews with WAN managers, we're going to hear the story of H&M's network, sort of how it's set up, the process that Johan and his colleagues took to get it where it is, and hopefully something a little about where it's headed. So Johan, I thought it would be great if you could just start out by introducing a little bit about your background, H&M itself, and what you're doing there.
Okay, thanks. Well, my name is Johan Ihse, and I've been with H&M for the past almost 5 years now. So during that time, I've been working within the infrastructure and network domain, basically all the time. Prior to coming to H&M, I've done various things within the IT area. I started off my career a long time ago working for an ISP, Telia Carrier. Maybe you've heard about it. It's one of the
A
big.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
large
absolutely.
network, very
Yeah,
big.
yeah.
So I actually got all my knowledge there regarding internet and how basically the whole infrastructure works from the communication
hmm
level. So I had various
hmm
positions in product management and product development within Telia.
I think that there's something to be said for having that telecom background in the WAN manager space. A lot of folks come the other direction, kind of just coming from a purely sort of network background, programming,
Mm.
ISDN telephone closets long ago, and sometimes they are missing some of the bigger picture of what the telecom world is out there. So it can be very helpful to have that background.
Yeah, for me it's been very useful, at least since I've been on the other side, and I
hmm
also understand the complexity if you have a network as large as ours, since
Right,
H&M as a company is a worldwide company. So that
right,
makes
right.
sometimes it makes life easier, and sometimes it makes
hmm
life a bit harder. But anyway, so after that I was working within Ericsson for 5 years with managed services. Hence,
hmm
when Ericsson are taking over operations from ISPs or mobile operators, so they can lower their capex and just have opex, to hence
Right.
outsourcing of operations. So that was a large journey as well within the Ericsson domain.
So you've done a sort of full circuit of the ecosystem, then, like carriers, managed service providers, and then end user. Huh?
Yeah,
So,
well, in
yeah.
between that, I was actually within the Swedish Armed Forces for a few years, working with IT on
Ah,
the
cool.
application layer. So
hmm Yeah.
I've done various things
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. Excellent.
Um,
Well, that all helps bring everything together,
yeah.
and to see different pictures. So,
Mm.
since you mentioned H&M is a global company, it is has a big reach. Can you just give us like a general high level picture of what the network looks like now? I assume in retail, a lot of the companies I talk to have 150, 200 sites, especially
Mm.
sort of more large offices, kind of with knowledge workers. You have a bunch of retail locations. I assume you have way more than that. What kind of site count do you have around the world, and what's the geographic distribution?
Well, in general, we have a presence we are in about 55 online markets across the globe, and we are present in
hmm
about 75 countries with our stores.
Wow.
So it's a fairly extensive footprint, and of course
hmm
we deliver our operations and our stores in different ways. Sometimes they are basically outsourced operations, and sometimes it's
mm
most of the time it's within our own responsibility. Depends a little bit about the legal structure in the countries. But then that's the size of the store network. So it's about 4,800 ish. And you can all find it on the webpage if you want to have the exact figure.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So you can
Absolutely.
find it there.
But that's
Um,
that's a really, I mean, like I said, that's a bigger network than a lot of the enterprises that we talk to in our surveys and these conversations. So you have a lot of sites to manage. I assume then also that you have those sites kind of differentiated by general type. You've got some, back office headquarters kind of sites. A lot of those are point of sale. Can you give us kind of a rundown of what types of sites you're
Mm.
dealing with there?
Yeah, actually, what we have is we have looked at the different type of site. Though I mean, basically, the business at H&M is within require certain support functions to support the stores and our online sales, of course, as well.
hmm
And as we all know, you need to have these huge, large warehouses which is
Right.
essentially the heart of everything, supporting store operations in one or many countries, and also supporting the online area, of course, as well. And
Hmm.
then you have the other side of the chain, so to say. That's when you have our call centers, when we have customers calling us asking any type of questions, and working with that. And of course, those has to be multi-language. Warehouses have to be in locations
Mm-hmm.
that are strategically good, as well as that they usually have a complexity, because we know that land is much cheaper far out
Hmm.
from
Yeah, that's
cities,
right.
and that's
Yeah.
good from a real estate perspective. But from
Yes.
from from a network perspective, it could be a bit of a challenge, because of course the availability requirements are really high for that type of
Right.
sites.
Yeah, the real estate team never thinks about telecom, do they? Yeah.
Well, we try to be there early on, and just to have the
Yeah.
discussions ongoing, because the lead times are
Right.
often very long as well to get the
Right.
required availability. So that's the way we
Hmm.
try to
Hmm.
approach it. Yeah.
All right. So, could you take us through kind of what the the product configuration of your network is now? Are you running MPLS? Are you running internet?
Mhm.
What kind of services are you running, and does that differ by site?
Well, essentially, when I joined H&M a few years ago, we were in the middle of a large outsourcing project. But
Hmm.
but the actual network at that time was decided to. We had essentially, since we have a fairly high amount of internal knowledge within the company,
Hmm.
within
Hmm.
routing and switching and LAN and Wi-Fi. So I would say it's very skilled people that works there, like in an ISP, more or less. So it was
Hmm.
very
Hmm.
technology driven. And then basically we had a structure where we came from a legacy where we had a lot of servers actually out in any type of office. And there was a drive
Hmm.
to try to consolidate those. And
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
on top of that, it was a decision made that we should have like a core backbone as any ISP, more or less. And then we should tie in
That you're
our
operating rather
yeah,
than just sort of getting. Okay, gotcha.
yeah. So
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
have the complete design responsibility for it,
Hmm.
and then someone else is taking care of operations. So
Gotcha.
that was the case when I came aboard there, and then we had taken a decision to reach those POPs primarily via VPLS or Ethernet, essentially.
Hmm.
So it was a layer two
Hmm.
service.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but since then, of course, things have changed a lot.
Right. Yes,
Um,
indeed. Yeah.
we had this buzzword cloud came into to play, of course.
Hmm.
So there has been a lot of changes in the last years, how to make the most out of the new technologies out there to make H&M more competitive and faster, and reach quicker times to
Right.
market.
Yeah, to
Um,
focus on that point real
mhm.
quick, if you don't mind, you mentioned you had a lot of servers in, I assume, like on your corporate premises. So have you gone to a cloud solution where you're pushing more of that to cloud service providers, or are you doing more kind of a bare metal solution where you still have your own servers just in public colo kind of facilities? What options do you go for there?
Well, basically, the strategy from an H&M perspective is to be cloud based. That
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
that's that's what the strategy is all about. Of course, it takes time to do these things, because you have lots of applications, and they have been
Right.
developed for being on-prem, close to network, and those
Right.
things. So
Right.
so it's a mix, but there are very aggressive targets
Hmm.
to reach certain numbers to be in the cloud. And then in the long run, the intention is to be, for now, completely within the cloud. That
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's I hear this story so often where someone like you in charge of global connectivity, there's so many different teams within IT that you don't think about. You know, it's not only just the security team that you have
Mhm.
but also DevOps or whatever kind of software in house that you guys are doing. Like they want a particular thing, but does that work with how you have your network set up? And it becomes while the freedom of SD-WAN promises some kind of sort of ease, it also creates a lot of complexity in this new environment. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think that we've been, the old arguments for SD-WAN, at least when I have met suppliers within the SD-WAN domain a few years ago, was essentially get rid of MPLS, start using internet. Okay,
Right,
fair
right.
enough. That's good. I understand that the internet is it's a different price tag on it, but you should also be very aware that when you buy internet instead of MPLS, you basically want to utilize an completely open infrastructure for something that it was not built for from the beginning.
Right.
It is not the same thing all the time that you get when you
Hmm.
buy MPLS, and if you of course don't understand the underlying technologies behind it, you may not see that. Um, but we took a different path in H&M actually to reach that part of the site. So just like 3 years ago, I initiated a project um,
Hmm.
to basically say that we should get rid of our old Ethernet lines, as I mentioned before,
Right,
and
right.
we have you know two fairly simple bullets that we always try to stick to. That's reduced amount of hardware in our network and more internet-based infrastructure.
Hmm.
So it
Hmm.
it had nothing to do with SD-WAN or anything
Gotcha.
from the
Okay, yeah,
beginning.
because I was going to ask people who do have, whether it's VPLS or Ethernet private line or whatever, that's
Mm,
part of the issue, is that layer two doesn't work well with SD-WAN. There's a lot of SD-WAN
true.
companies out there that really don't even support layer two. But you're saying your move away from the layer two environment was driven more by the desire to be in a layer three kind of cloud enabled environment. Is that what you're saying?
No, I think to be honest that it was there's another side note. In order to be more ready for the cloud, and also
Hmm.
as I said, you have more internet-based infrastructure. Essentially, as I
Right.
described, the old hub and spoke technology that we had in our network with backbone. Essentially, what we did in the past was more or less just backhauling traffic to those core nodes, and then we were sending the
Right.
internet traffic out through those POPs, and that's just
Hmm.
a cost for us
Right,
just to send
right.
the
To have that
traffic
centralized breakout.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
we established a design where we break out locally from any offices around the globe,
Hmm.
and then we reach a cloud proxy essentially, and
Gotcha.
then we tap out as much traffic as we can as close as possible to the edge.
Hmm.
And by
Hmm.
doing that, of course, you get completely, since we have legal entities in all our countries, as I mentioned before,
Right.
it's very easy for me to utilize that legal entity to locally purchase internet ports.
Hmm.
And of course there is a huge price difference if you go to a local tier 2 ISP
Right.
compared to any of the big global players.
Hmm.
So
And are you talking DIA there? Are you talking business broadband, like something with with SLAs and symmetrical service, or is it depend on where the office is and what it has
yeah,
available?
yeah. Since we are in so many places across the globe, if you go to Sri Lanka or Pakistan or
Hmm.
Bangladesh, those countries are of course extremely tricky. And then maybe in those places you need to have like MPLS or something like with an SLA associated to it. But
Hmm.
usually, I think this is a maturity thing within an enterprise. Usually, when you go to any country where you are in a place which is have fairly well developed infrastructure, you in my view you get almost the same availability or even higher if you have two ISPs connected to that particular
Absolutely.
site instead
Yeah.
of just
Yeah.
one. So
Hmm.
what we have done, we have established a framework, and then we work with all our countries in
Hmm.
what option is the best, so to say. So we have standardized configuration templates for how to do things with internet and or
Right.
Ethernet, for instance. Um,
So in a sense, you're sending kind of like the standard, almost like policy, not policy in the IT sense
mm,
necessarily, but policies for local teams who speak the local languages that can work with local ISPs to get
yeah,
connectivity. So you almost have like you said, like a mini telco operating like a sourcing division around the world,
yeah,
essentially.
it's very similar to. I mean, I usually call it just for fun, like the McDonald's concept, right? There are few
Right.
few,
Yeah.
few different options, and they
Hmm.
should taste the same everywhere, right?
Right. Right. Right.
But there is a point in having high standardization because I mean, every time you start to do deviations, you open up the risk for having more issues and more, special configurations in a router or whatever. And when something goes wrong, because it always goes wrong at some point in
Of
time,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
then you start to then you suddenly have an operations department that could have a lot of problems to fix those. So
Hmm.
we have
Hmm.
been really like classic plan, build, operate, as you do in any operations organization. We've been really strict on that. Worked a lot with documentation, high level
Hmm.
documents, low level documents, standard operation procedures. But it takes a long time to get it done, and it
Right.
requires
Right.
different type of competences, of course, to do that.
Hmm.
But it's been a long journey.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, and just like your point earlier, it requires having already on board a specific set of expertise among the IT team. If you're, I talked to some, sort of large multinational enterprises that have very small WAN or IT infrastructure teams.
Mm.
You really couldn't do the kind of thing you're doing unless you already had a certain level of expertise on
Yeah.
board, I assume, right? So, yeah.
Exactly. So it depends on what sourcing model you want to have. I mean, you can of course go to one player and ask them to take care of it all. That's perfectly fine. Or you
Hmm.
can, as we have in H&M. I mean, one part is the network, of course, but the other side of things is that, at least in the past, this is shifting a bit now, but you have also application operations, and essentially what the network is there for is to provide, users to use the applications. That's
Right.
why we are here.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
yeah,
nothing
exactly.
else essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have chosen a model where we have a different. Then it's not a fully outsourced model at all in that sense. So the responsibility lies within H&M, and that requires that you do have very skilled people, I would say. And usually they
Hmm.
pay off fairly quick if you start to look at the negotiations with the suppliers, and also what value you can provide to the business.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about price yet, which is surprising because that's my main job as a pricing analyst for network services, right? But I mean, obviously, this choice, a lot of it has to be driven by the fact that it's so much cheaper to go to a local ISP and get internet than it is to go to, say, even a European PTT, say, or whatever, is still going to charge a lot more for doing all of that sourcing for you, but also for having a bigger network reach. So it sounds like you're sort of piecing a network together yourself, I assume, in part because you're going to save a lot of money that way.
Yeah, that's of course true, and I mean, lots of people were very, skeptical about this approach in the beginning, but when we really
Hmm.
started to establish the standard, the McDonald's concept, as I said, then it's much
Right.
easier for us to know what to ask for, and then we can help our countries to do that. And usually, when you go into to any country, if you take, as an example, France, for instance, that's a big market for H&M
Right.
as an example. And I mean, of course, locally, they purchase more things than just, bandwidth to the stores. They have telephony agreements. It could be
Hmm.
anything, right? And
Hmm.
usually, of course,
Hmm.
they want to piggyback on those things if they have local business that is not just related to network for one particular supplier.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that
Hmm.
usually works out pretty well, to have. But it's all a question about the central knowledge about what we can do, and
Hmm.
work together with the local staff,
Right.
in every
Right.
country. So it's an ongoing dialogue, and that's extremely important to have that, even though it's not on the application layer, but more on the infrastructure, to have that dialogue with the countries all the time, because
Hmm.
they open up stores, they close offices, they build
Right.
warehouses.
Yep.
So you need to be like a little bit, ahead of them all the time for what they may ask
Hmm.
for, but also you're always a bit behind, right?
Yeah,
So
of
it's
course,
a
of course.
funny
Well,
game.
I imagine in some cases you have to get some greenfield development, especially in the warehouse kind of situation. You may not have two ISPs already connected to that location, or have you had to deal with that? I mean, provisioning times for digging trenches or
Yeah.
whatever can be a nightmare, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely. But to me, we just have to, with the knowledge we have within this area, we should be aware about that, and then we should
Hmm.
also be able to prepare for when those questions come up. So, can you do
Hmm.
mobile instead as a backup for a while, for instance? Can you do, in worst of cases, satellite that doesn't happen today. But so we can
Yeah.
support the business with the availability requirements that they have. So if we are
Hmm.
prepared for that, we know that the questions will come, and then we also know that when you start to deal with landlords to get the diverse fiber path, it could take a long time due to any local legal, restrictions. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a
Absolutely.
we have had a few, fairly tough cases in that area, but
Hmm.
so far everything has worked out fairly well on the WAN block, so to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a quick follow up on a couple things you said there. Is LTE kind of an important part, or is that really for you something a connectivity option of last resort, basically?
It's a good question. I think you have to look at it from a few different ways based on where we are
Hmm.
now when we're talking about COVID and those things.
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
so, so one thing is when you talk about LTE as a you know uh, possibility for a backup or whatever
Hmm.
in a physical location, we can go for a warehouse again as an example, where that site has to be online all the time because we have
Right.
online systems, right? If there are no, we actually developed a solution for this some time ago, but the solution didn't really work out in the beginning,
Hmm.
so we had to go back to the lab and try it out. And it's many, you have things such as header size, how many frames are supported, if you speak from a technical perspective, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to test it in the lab. It takes some time, but in the end we
Hmm.
managed to get it done. But that's one part. And then when 5G will be more available, it's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
talk about 5G, but it's not really there yet. So
Yeah.
it's
Well, it's not deployed widely as a networking technology. I truthfully, I'm asking everyone I can about this because from where I sit, it seems like right now most of the carriers are presenting 5G as more of a Wi-Fi replacement as a
Yeah,
campus
yeah.
technology. Yeah.
It's a good point, and we have touched base about this a few times with different players as well, and it's exactly as you say. I mean, you have 5G as an alternative to Wi-Fi, but
Hmm.
then it is the same thing there. There are some positive things with 5G, which is, I'm not an expert in this area, but
Hmm.
positioning, for instance, you can do that much better than when you have Wi-Fi,
Right.
as an
Yeah.
example.
Hmm.
So then you can use
Hmm.
that in your factories or whatever. But if you talk about the network and within an office environment, so to say, I mean, what I see in the long run, I think in general we see across the globe that more people working from home. It's been much more accepted to work from home.
Right. Yeah. It's
We
here to stay, right? I
Yeah,
think
well,
so.
I
Yeah.
think it is in one
Yeah.
way or another, and
Yeah.
that really it's an interesting area when it comes to LTE, because um, my own view is that
Hmm.
I think that the kind of offices that we have today will look completely different in a few years from now. I think
I
we will have
agree. Yeah.
meeting places, meeting areas,
Hmm.
right? I think
Absolutely.
my office can be back home, as where you and me are now. We rely on our home internet that we use. If we go to a coffee shop, we rely on the local Wi-Fi there. We
Right.
may go to a meeting location where we meet colleagues, but then, so I think from a network perspective and LTE or even 4G, what you will see in the long run is that you will have clients that can support all of these access types, and you don't even need to have a Wi-Fi in parts of your office.
Hmm.
Maybe you don't need to
Hmm.
have a network at all there. Maybe you have the network in your
Well,
laptop
yeah.
instead. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a real question, right? So, as
yeah,
someone whose job it is to, your title is global connectivity
yeah.
head, right? So,
Good.
do you see that as well? First of all, and I apologize because I didn't mention ahead of time that we would talk about security, but since we go in this direction, I mean,
Fine.
first of all, obviously, in order to really achieve that, we need to have an actual edge-based security kind of
Yes.
solution. Right now everyone's doing a kind of stopgap thing with VPN IPsec that's
Mm,
been around
mm,
forever.
mm.
But if you really want to still think of that, what you describe as the network, then the thing that defines network is that every device that's getting on the network
Yes,
is a security node essentially,
yes,
right?
yes.
is kind of zero trust, or I almost try to avoid using this term, but it's inevitable now. The
Mhm.
SASE kind of model,
Yeah.
is that something that you guys are looking toward adopting?
I mean, zero trust is on the radar, but I can honestly say that we haven't really. It's one of those buzzwords, right? That you can
Of course.
when you start to lift a
That's
little bit on the blanket, you say,
yeah.
what's in it for us, right? And
Hmm.
and and
Hmm.
and so I think we are in try to shape it or to understand how it could be used in a smart way to support H&M business and needs as I just described to you.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
but we're not there yet. But that's of course big things. It's much more than just network. It's client
Right.
applications. But from a generic perspective, I think more of the security aspect you can put on the application layer.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
less complex the infrastructure has to be, and that
Right.
that creates agility and speed because then people working closer to the business value do not need
Right.
to rely on having me to provide some specific feature whatever. So from that
Right.
perspective I think that's a good way to go, but
Mhm.
it's no decisions made yet whatsoever. It takes time to
Yeah.
get
Yeah,
done.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And
Mm.
to let, I mean, right now, really, like when someone talks about SASE, it's a concept. It's not even really products that are available from most vendors necessarily, so
Yeah, and I think that's a good
yeah.
point that you mentioned that because if we come back to the SD-WAN part of our
Hmm.
our
Hmm.
infrastructure, like it's been on the map for a long time, both for our store operations and for the rest of our network. Um, it was like a few years ago, but at that time, as I said before, it was the main pitch was replace MPLs with internet, and then I told
Right.
the suppliers, but if I'm already doing that, what
Right.
value
Right.
can you give me then?
Right.
And we
Hmm.
had lots of good discussions, but at that
Hmm.
point, at that time, also I think that the solutions as such were fairly undeveloped compared to how they are today. So
Hmm. Hmm.
we can see that it's a rapid development phase of any SD-WAN solution,
Right.
and
Right.
and
Absolutely.
I'm actually pretty happy that we have waited a bit
Hmm.
to go down that
Hmm.
road because I think it could have created a lot of challenges that we were not ready for. Um,
Yeah, if you already have it deployed before these new features, the ability to integrate VNFs and that sort of
mm,
thing was out, then you already have all of this maybe physical hardware out there that you now already have to kind of rip and replace or update and
mm,
all that sort of thing,
true,
right?
true.
So you brought it up then. Where are you kind of with SD-WAN adoption? You've teased that a bit, but are you rolling out now? Have you selected vendors? Are you going in that direction? Definitely.
Yeah, but it's as I said before, we have different site categories here, right?
Right.
I mean, the
Hmm.
stores, it's a large operation, it's huge scale. We have common solutions for
Right.
a point of sales, for instance, and that require a very high standardization to make it work from operation perspective, as I described to you before.
Hmm.
So currently we are rolling out an SD-WAN solution in all our stores. That's an ongoing project right now
Hmm.
to see how we can then make more out of that platform and get consolidation possibilities in our network, and also to
Hmm.
use that technology to create higher availability for services that are in the stores, because in the
Right.
long run in the stores it's the same thing there. It takes time for things to develop, but more of the suppliers, they will be cloud based in the future. I mean, the
Right.
suppliers work from their side as well as we from our side wants to. As I said before, if you in any country have any local initiatives to create some kind of activity in our store to generate more sales, I don't want to be there as a bottleneck from a network
Right.
perspective. No, no,
Exactly.
no, no.
Hmm.
Then we should just say, okay, fine, you can do it, and according to your time plans, you can generate more revenues to H&M, more or less, right?
Right.
Um, so that's on the store side. And then for the rest of the network, we are actually right now in the middle of performing POCs for
Hmm.
SD-WAN as well to have it
Hmm.
deployed. But there it's a little bit different. Again, we go back to the different site categories. What needs do they have?
Right. Right.
We have warehouses, for instance, in any locations such as where you have lots of third-party providers, you have
Hmm.
scanners, all kinds of things, and of course our warehouse operations business legs, so to say, they constantly try to improve and have more efficient operations, more like just in time, everything that comes with online sales, right? And to
Right.
provide our stores with garments when they are running out.
And
So
is that driving some IoT adoption, like at the warehouses?
yeah, there are lots of things ongoing in that area. I
Hmm.
mean, those sites are so big. It's like sites of
Hmm.
several football fields. So, I mean, just
Right.
how do you like
Yeah.
optimize for like work? If I'm working there, if I'm the one who go picks up, garments, how do I optimize my path, right?
Right.
Because it's
Right.
the distances are so long. So there are
Yeah.
many things ongoing. I'm not really into that, but
Wow.
of course we all understand that that's like a essential part to support the H&M
Hmm.
business.
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, that's an interesting point where the network team's role, like you kind of mentioned before, is to support obviously the business needs,
Mm.
but you're getting instructions from the rest of the sort of IT team if they're trying to optimize paths in the warehouse or whatever, and I hear a lot of really interesting things in the retail end as well,
Mm.
going back to that about identifying customers when they walk into the store and pushing information to their mobiles and stuff like that. Is that something that might be coming down the pike to impact you guys?
Yeah, there are things ongoing within that domain. I mean, from a
Hmm.
from a from a general perspective, I mean, we have a since H&M is such a big company, we have a huge customer base going in and out to our stores.
Right.
And I am confident that within our AI domain, for instance, we are working on how can we get more knowledge about the behavior, because everything
Hmm.
is about personalization,
Right.
and those things, but and of course then you do need to have technical platforms that support you to get more information that is then okay to bring in and summarize according. You have GDPR and also those things coming into play as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Oh man,
let's not forget
made
about that.
everything difficult, didn't it? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
I understand the impetus behind it certainly,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
it caused, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So lots of those things are ongoing, and then also, I mean, even though I happen to work with a network in H&M, as I said to you before, I have no intention to just build a huge network. We should be where it's required and needed,
Right.
and sometimes I say to the people that I work with, if we can save X amount of money here, uh, we
Hmm.
can reallocate those money to do a campaign or whatever, right? So
Right.
it's very easy. The more far away you are from the core business, the easier it is to forget that we are actually here to do that and be a strictly demand-driven organization, uh,
Right.
and support it. But it's challenged with infrastructure as well, because sometimes, since we talk to a lot of people, and we also talk to a lot of suppliers, and we have sometimes we figure out things that maybe the business units haven't really figured out themselves yet. So
Yeah.
it's like top down and
Yeah.
bottom up, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that's an interesting one. And then of course our cloud journey will change our network topology completely.
Of
Yeah,
course. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. That will be the case. So that's, I would say, is priority number one now, to change
Hmm.
our whole network layout towards being cloud adopted, and as I said before, more internet, less hardware. How do we
Right.
what will happen, right? In within that domain.
Do you also need to think about sort of of course, from telegeography, this is the way we always
Mhm.
frame it, but your cloud geography. So it's one thing to say, I'm going to use AWS, I'm going to
Mhm.
use Azure,
Mhm. Mhm.
whatever. But then when you have this global network where you're doing a lot of probably cloud computing in terms of the warehouse data processing, or maybe even eventually store data processing on
Mhm.
customers,
Mhm.
are you looking at how to best site those cloud instances for the best performance around all these different global sites? Is that something that's down the road, maybe a little, or?
No, I think, yeah. I mean, it's this always goes in chunks. If you want to drive change, we have had before very just point in one direction where you should go towards the cloud. just to
Hmm.
get the ball rolling, which has been
Right,
very
right.
good. But
Yeah, you have to take the first step to
yes,
start, right? Yeah.
exactly. And then at some point in time, you start to ask yourselves the questions that you just brought up there, right?
Right.
How do we optimize this in a smart way? Like a simple thing, very simple in a way. Where do we have our staff today? If you just
Hmm.
took the map behind you, where do we have our staff, right? So
Right.
if you have like
Right. Exa
55% of them in Sweden for now, maybe it
Mhm,
would be wise to have, you know, cloud resources close to those. If you have a lot of people
mhm.
in China, which is where they are very far ahead in payment solutions, we all know that in China it
Right.
looks very different.
Right.
So maybe we need to have possibilities to use cloud services there, of course. So I think
Mhm,
it's a balance that it will go back and forth. But I think cloud will be as anything from an infrastructure perspective. You have to put it like a little bit more what options are available and how do you make the most out of that based on what your particular enterprise is doing.
mhm. Absolutely.
That's my guess.
I want to touch on something that we brought up a little while before, just to kind of circle back on in terms of obviously your retail sites have probably mostly stayed online this whole time. Your warehouse sites have mostly stayed online this whole time, but you have knowledge workers, the sort of back office, as it were, headquarters, with I'm presuming a lot of folks as you are staying home,
Mm,
and that may continue in the future. And you mentioned this sort of model of having meeting places more so than office spaces. If that does kind of materialize that way, they
yeah.
decide to save money on Class A office space or whatnot. Does that change the way you see things? Obviously, you may need smaller connections
Mm.
at those sites, but are you going to think about how well those home broadband connections work for certain employees? Like maybe if it's only the
Mm.
C level or the
Mm.
upper management, is that something that comes on your radar as an infrastructure manager?
Not for now, I would say at least. It's not.
Hmm.
I mean, we have the basically. It's no, I wouldn't say so. Um, but it's an interesting topic that you bring up. But I maybe look at it from a bit of a different view. I mean, in the past, at least, this has always been like you work from home. Sometimes you have issues, and then you drop you drop a call to the service desk,
Right.
and maybe the VPN client isn't working or whatever. But
Hmm.
and then it was always like decided that the office space was better from every aspect than working from
Right.
home. But today, I would say that I would say that the the work from home quality is accepted almost from any type of personas, as we call it in H&M. You have different
Mm-hmm.
categories of people doing different things, but if you do work with heavy applications or work with design of clothing and those things, of course there may be a need that you need to have a high speed connection, but it could also be that you need to have a high end laptop instead.
Right. Right. Of
So, but
course.
I
Yeah.
think we learn as we go within this area, and it's an interesting topic that we have discussed a few times internally. As that, what would it really look like? But mainly from my perspective, it's like, you know, when we do life cycle management, for instance, of gear, should
Hmm.
we? Lots of people are working from home today, and basically lots of the equipment is unused. Same goes for network links, right?
Of course. Yeah. But it's
So
under contract, right? So that's,
yeah,
yeah.
true. It
Yeah.
is under contract, so
Yeah.
you have to work
Yeah.
constantly with those things and see how you
Right.
can optimize based on the situation right now. And yeah, I think everything is gonna change a lot. But the main focus now, from our network perspective, is to get SD-WAN deployed and start to use that functionality. And also,
Mhm.
we really try to look more. We have like a bit of a vision, like network as a code. Uh,
Yeah,
so
that's an interesting topic. Yeah, I need to do a lot more homework there. But what are you guys looking to do with that concept? Sort of, is it in terms of turning on bandwidth as needed? Is it in terms of getting the network itself to be more intelligent about what is happening on the network at that time without engineers getting involved? What's your sort of
yeah,
goal
I
there?
think it's, to be honest, we are in the exploration phase about this.
Hmm. Hmm.
But simple things such as, you can look at this from different perspective, but if you look from an operational perspective, I mean, you could in theory have scripts checking the devices. If you have problems, they can do certain things automatically that
Hmm.
that an engineer needs to do in case someone calls in and if there's a problem. So you can
Right.
save time and gain efficiency there. You can in theory have like zero touches, of course, the next thing.
Right.
That's on
Right.
the other side when you come more on the implementation side of things.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
so it's a variety of things. How we should try to work with this. But the SD-WAN as a part is of course the first thing, and then there are all these types of tools that you can use for automation, right? To
Hmm.
get things more efficient. But if we could in the long run have like orderable features in our ordering systems, that would be really
Right.
nice. So it
Right.
just pushes the config uh, towards that particular device, and that's it. Easy to
Right.
say, hard to achieve, of course. Yeah.
It's hard to achieve, and there's something that always sticks with me about this topic in general, because when you look at what I don't know how familiar you are maybe with the work of like MEF and although the work they're doing on standardization for both sort of orchestration and then separately for SD-WAN, but all of it is around these conversations about provisioning on demand, bandwidth on demand, and all that
Mm.
kind of stuff, which is really cool, especially in the data center and on the network core. But in the end, you still have to have a pipe of a certain size going
Yeah.
to the office, right?
True. True.
So it's like, I mean, maybe with fiber at a lot of offices, and you can, but in the end, it still comes down to how much bandwidth do I have going to that office, and is it on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no,
So.
you're right. But I think it's different, a few different aspects of that. If you talk about the Metro Ethernet Forum and those things, it's
Hmm.
it's a lot of based on you have like the legacy world where you have carriers selling to ISPs and where you want to create values in that direction. But I think if you look into what enterprises require, it may look a bit different. I don't say
Right.
it's
Right.
good or bad, but I say it's just a bit different.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
so,
Yeah,
so
the world looks different sitting from that side than it does when your primary goal is things like provisioning customers instead of making
yes,
your internal
yes,
customers
yes,
able to do their
yes,
job, right? So
yes.
yeah.
And of course, I mean, it's easy to discuss these things, but I think any enterprise looks different. I mean, they have different skill set within the organization, as we said before, and I
Right.
think also that, of course, it's a challenge for the suppliers sometimes because they have to.
Right.
It depends on what you need to get as an enterprise, and in some areas you have
Right.
extremely high knowledge, maybe too high sometimes, and in some,
Yeah.
yeah, sure,
Yeah.
and
They
sometimes
want to they want to do everything themselves rather than,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
exactly,
Hmm.
correct. So,
Hmm.
but that it's an interesting area. I've talked a lot of carriers and listened to what they have to say, and
Hmm.
it's funny to see how they try to work with these things. Absolutely.
Yeah, and also, in our WAN manager survey, we where we can, we break some of the information out by industry, for example, and we see just in simple questions like what services are you using, what kind of bandwidths are you using. There are very big differences between the industries, which
Mm.
have to do with what kind of compute needs they have and what kind of reporting needs they have. If you're in healthcare, you have all kinds of reporting
Yeah.
that you have to do, and that lends itself to a different networking style than it does if you're
Mm.
in, say, technology and everything has already been optimized for best efforts from the get-go anyway,
Yeah.
so
It's the
yeah.
point. But I think, I mean, we're not really there yet, but I think the next thing would be like, call it like edge computing or whatever,
Hmm.
where you actually
Hmm.
can span out, you can span out the cloud to any particular site, for instance. But who knows what will happen in that field? But I think that's an interesting area as well that will come up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was really fascinating. Any final thoughts on sort of where you see things going or anything like that?
No, I mean, within H&M now, we
Yeah,
have
we
lots of things to focus on to support our business, as I said a few times here,
right,
and
right.
make the most out of the functionalities that are available in the market now, and make it work, because that's a lot of work for us. Yeah.
That's the key,
Hmm?
right? And to it's been a sort of exciting time now. There was a long time where things were fairly static in the WAN. When MPLS kind of replaced private line for most people, and that
Mm.
was just what you did. I think now it's become more of an issue of like you have to stay on top of changes that are coming at a very rapid pace, but not jump in too quickly and have to rethink everything all over again just a few years later, right?
Yeah,
So.
true.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I always like to end things though on a sort of non-telecom note, and for that, I'm just curious, what is maybe the one thing that you are missing the most or looking the most forward to once we have a vaccine distributed across the world and
Mm.
life returns to a little bit of more normal?
Having a pint in a pub.
You know what?
That's
That
what I'm
is really
missing
funny
actually with
because
friends.
that is, yeah, absolutely. That is a very common answer to that question, and I agree.
Yeah.
I actually do like a fun podcast of my own outside of
Mhm.
work about drinking songs. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
haven't been able to sing any songs with my podcast partner in real life for a long time. So
All the best for this year then, right?
yeah, exactly, absolutely.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, yes. Fingers crossed. No, I'm still pretty far down the vaccine distribution list, but you know, it's coming in sight. So, excellent. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining us, Johan, and I hope we can check in soon and see how
Yeah.
all of this works
All
out.
right. Thanks. Bye.
Excellent. Bye. Thanks very much for listening. The WAN Manager podcast is brought to you by TeleGeography, a division of Primetrica Incorporated, and is edited and produced by Jane Miller. I wrote the theme song you're listening to right now, and we get administrative canine support from my dog Honeybun, who you might hear chiming in from time to time when the mood strikes her. If you want to learn more about our data, head over to telegeography.com, where you can find our blog that covers many of the topics we hit here, and you can sign up for our WAN Manager newsletter. Until next time, have a great day. So if you're listening and you like what you hear on the WAN Manager podcast, we think you're going to love the WAN Forum. Coming this spring, the WAN Forum is a new community and content hub that has been curated by me and my colleagues at TeleGeography. So what does that mean? Well, it means we're building an online space for those folks who manage wide area networks and maintain IT infrastructure for mid to large enterprises. WAN Forum members can access exclusive TeleGeography analysis presentations, research tools, bonus podcast content, and lots more. We're currently putting the finishing touches on the WAN Forum, and we can't wait to show you the whole thing this spring. Now, normally membership is going to cost $999 a year, but if you want early access to the platform, in exchange for your feedback, we'll let you take that first look for free. So if you like the sound of that, email us at info@wanforum.com and we'll send you more details, and we look forward to seeing you at the WAN Forum.